the Zuckerborgs. I don't use Facebook anymore. It's not just censorship, it's embarrassing. They put you in their prison. They put you in Facebook jail. I've served about 5 or 6 sentences and I realized, you know what, they're never going to accept me. At no point am I ever going to be welcome at their party. And I'm fine with that. We don't need to breathe their air. We have our own. All right, let's see here. Les Goes joined us there in the chat. Awesome. Tommy Jones. Okay, cool. Now, I haven't sent out notifications yet. Going to. I'm not being lazy. It's just that I'm testing out a couple of features. Like, for example, I put a fan in the corner of the office because I think I'm too loud for the chiropractor and the hypnotherapist on either side of me. And I don't know what kind of ideas I'm putting into people's heads. So out of courtesy, no one asked me, no one accused me of being too loud, but I'm just, preemptively using a fan to block out noise. So I think I should be able to hang out here mornings as well. The main development, though, is this. I just got the Auto Hoaxology 101 textbook in, the first batch. And I'm going to have to hang on to these until Monday, because Monday we have a media crew coming in from a very large newspaper in Europe. They're going across America, from what I can tell, or at least the Southwest, and they're interviewing a number of conspiracy theorists. Not just any conspiracy theorists, but people who talk about the shape of the world, or the lack thereof. And they're going to be meeting at the headquarters here with me and anybody else who wants to come down to Albuquerque for the first IPS headquarters meetup. And this is just the first. We've already been talking about this plan for ongoing cyber symposiums, where we address one topic at a time. I bring in a panel of experts. We sit in the conference room. We have the dry erase board. And we debate and discuss concurrently live and in person. And that this is going to be a common facet of the IPS think tank. And now we're at the stage where we begin to move the think tank across the world stage, confronting it directly. Set controls for the heart of the world stage, just right to the middle. No longer on the fringe because we're outside of their censorship zone. Now we can start interacting in the real world because now we are a real news agency. And the only one operating from an off-world stage perspective. So the first thing they're going to see when they come into the office here are the publications. They're going to see the Auto Hoaxology 101, which will be the basis for most of what I say. It's the framework. But also they're going to see the tabloid, which is what we're going into next. We're going into the production of the IPS Insider tabloid, and we're going to activate all of our on-the-street reporters. And our reportage is going to be next level. This isn't fake, undercover, ambush journalism. No, I'm thinking more traditional, but gonzo level, as in deep reporting, deep dives. And the penguin is the deepest diving of all diving birds. All right, joined here by Frank Murr, Junders Plunkett, Linda Curtis, 737, Copacetic, JT33 says, hey now, you know on your iPhone how it stores videos in your iTunes player or whatever? Just on a weird coincidence last night, it played a JT33 rap. JT33 as Eric Dubay, the self-described Yoga Moses, rapping from his ice cream truck, trying to recruit kids into getting the Flat Earth app because it's not a piece of crap. Anyway, it was just kind of surprising, and nobody in the car with me knew what we were listening to, but they liked it. It's definitely funny, and we need to get back to producing South Pole now that we're exiting the censorship zones. But to continue, I was contacted, and I haven't been very specific about who it is because we have saboteurs. I don't know if you know this, but back when the Flat Earth topic was going viral, ABC News, CBS, every agency was talking about it. At that time, there were dozens, I'm talking dozens, probably 30 or 40 interviews, many interviews that were headed towards Mad Mike Hughes. So he could talk about his plan to launch the rocket, confronting NASA and their claims, etc. And those were intercepted. Those were intercepted by our stalker who created a fake website front, and he bragged about it. He bragged about how many interviews he managed to block. I've had instances of people contacting agencies ahead trying to essentially blackball us, bury us, and I don't want that to happen this time. Although I think it's definitely too late because they're here. They're in America. They're driving from California to here. We spoke for about an hour this morning. They wanted to get an idea of who or what I am and how I operate. And they understand pretty clearly that I work out of an HQ, but that we're part of a think tank. So part of what they want to do is they want to film this interaction, and they want to understand, are we serious? Where are we coming from? How do we make these statements? And we got into some pretty nuanced explanations as to how do I justify making this claim? What are the claims that we're making, and what would constitute evidence that would change our minds, etc. And we had a conversation about fakeability, about how I know some people who don't believe in pandas, but the reason why is the flawed logic. And the fakeability of it is, yeah, you can fake a panda bear, animatronics, animation, people in costumes, but can you fake it at scale and fool the world, zoos worldwide? No, that would include a conspiracy of millions or hundreds of thousands. But when it comes to space, there's only a handful of people that filter the information that we get. And just like maybe 500 people can actually verify they've been there supposedly, whereas any of us can go to the zoo. So what we're talking about is access to information, and it is not rational to say pandas don't exist, but it is rational to say space as represented is highly questionable and easily fakeable. And I also kind of made the point too that it's really more important to emphasize worldview over shape, because the worldview ultimately is the only thing we experience. You can't experience the shape, flat or round. You're too small, always will be. You never have to account for it. And the meaning of this worldview versus shape thing is that if you believe that it's a ball, that's your worldview, then you accept the limitations, the constraints, the scarcity, the environmental conditions that they say exist. You accept the premise of ICBMs, of space junk, of of basically alien invasions, anything you can think of that's science fiction, entered into the realm of possibility when you entered into the worldview as described by the NASAtologists. Oh, by the way, NASAtology is what I'm calling it now. Actually, I'm working on an article about this. I've been juxtaposing Scientology and NASA, an equally scammy, fake space religion. And I'm like, let's just call them NASAtologists. I've been arguing with these folks on Twitter, and they're part of a religion. They're doing damage control. They're very culty. They're very much like Scientologists. Now, the worldview question, though, is this. In my worldview, certain things are outside the realm of possibility. And the difference it makes is that I no longer have to blindly accept certain things, and it causes me to have to analyze each and every premise they assert. And that's where we're at right now, where we are philosophically examining the problem of existing in a hyper-mediated world, where the mediation is coming from a very specialized and narrow interest group. And that this is not something that's being argued from ignorance. Then we talked about the curve. And I'm like, look, I believed as a kid that the Earth curved and that boats went over the horizon, and ancient Greeks told us so. But then the P900 came out, and it let us see, with telescopic lenses, that that's more or less an optical illusion, that these boats are actually visible much further away. So there goes your physical perception of a curve. Now you've never seen a curve. Now you're lying if you say you have. Moreover, the Felix Baumgartner jump and others are all just GoPro lens distortions that give people a false perception, but that when you look at high altitude flights like U-2 planes, you don't see the curve. So no one has actually, quote, seen it. So this is where the conversation gets into what we're actually saying isn't that we believe we're on a disk in space, as they often misrepresent, but that we're suspending judgment, or rather suspending our agreement, withholding assent on what they say until we get more information. So we're the only ones here who don't walk around claiming we have all the answers. We're not the smug NASAtologists. Oh, we already know it all. Our ignorance ends at the edge of the universe. But we know everything else. It's like, no, I kind of think that's the big ruse. And I think that space, and I even explained this, and like they heard me out, which is probably going to be good, because my whole point is that I believe space is just a metaphor for inner space, mind control. And what they have done with this false model, if we're right, is they have given us a false model to reduce the size of our world concept. And it's about enforcing scarcity. And I did draw the analogy to the movie The Village, where you have the children born in a commune thinking it's the 19th century because their parents want to insulate them from the world, quarantine them from the modern world and its problems, and they find out they're in the 20th century. And I'm saying that, yeah, we're likely in the same situation. In fact, it is the case that we are in that situation. It's just a question of, is the village that we're in a physical village, or is it merely mental? Are we merely being held into a false world paradigm, or is there actually a geographical distortion? And this is another point. When you look at maps, like, do we really think that the same people that write history, that write the news, are honest when it comes to cartography? The only thing that matters? We could talk about ideas all day, but ultimately it's about property. It's about who owns the world, the ground. And it's kind of naive to think, well, yeah, everybody lies at the top. But when it comes to the shape and the size and how much land there is, yeah, they're not going to lie about that. Give me a break. Going through your comments here. JT33 says the world wasn't ready for Yoga Moses. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that Dubé is going to live to see his promised flat land of Nazi yogis or whatever he's doing. Salty says red pandas are so cute they almost look fake, but I think the same about my dog. Correct. And many things look fake doesn't mean they are fake. Many things look real doesn't mean they are real. But when it comes to the fakeability thing, pretty much everything is fakeable. Quite literally, even nukes. They can fake planets. If everything is fakeable, we have to include that in our worldview. But the main distinction is it fakeable at scale? And that's where you can separate the absurd notions of platypuses and koalas are fake from, well, things that are actually non-existent, or things that, it's just like, I think that there's this flood of so many different theories and ideas and no context, where it's almost just interchangeable, it doesn't matter. And I have to wonder, are people saying these things for clickbait, or are these legitimate assertions? And if you're going to make that a legitimate assertion, then you're giving away your operating system, that you think in stereotypes. Oh, well, these 5 pandas are fake, therefore all are fake. Well, those were cherry-picked. And then there's one other point here. To make a snap judgment on whether something is real or fake based on a few clips is technically rushing to judgment, because you don't have all the information. Like that sun bear that went viral because people thought it was a human being in a costume. Well, if you had only looked at the footage 30 seconds before and 30 seconds after, you would have said that's not a person, no way. So context is everything, but the media purposefully trains us to rush to judgment based on their selectively curated version of events. All right, let's see. If you're looking at the screen, those are hardbacks. Yeah, the Autohoaxology 101 textbook is only going to be available in hardback. I'm going to make a couple adjustments before I place the next bulk order, but these ones are going out signed Monday, right after the film crew leaves. It's kind of interesting how this worked out, because I decided that it was time to somehow, since we have the headquarters now, to establish a footprint in the Meetverse, because they control the metaverse. We know this. But the Meetverse, they don't totally control. And I thought, let's go ahead and get this textbook out there and get some sort of visual accompaniment to it. So I started working on a video, and I've been working on this for about 6 weeks now, mostly just doing B-roll. I went out to the zoo and I recorded gorillas and other things that have been accused of not existing, and things that are alleged to not exist or to be human beings in costumes. So I'm just stocking up on B-roll, and then I started contacting local independent media, inviting them over to the headquarters to interview and talk about this subject, not to debate, but to talk about it. And I acquired a list of about 7 or 8 local reporters who are very interested in this project, this video project, which I've described as something of a documentary, but not quite a documentary, more of an explanatory of the textbook, Autohoaxology 101. So I've already been working on this all this time, and then coincidentally, just as the books arrive, a news agency from Europe has arranged to send their locals over here to do exactly what I was going to do anyway, only I don't have to pay them to report, which is kind of interesting. I'm just saying it's a fascinating coincidence. And I ask, would this have happened, or would they have arranged this? Would this even be a thing if I wasn't already building it? If you build it, they will come. Sorry, Brian Stavely, for my Mandela effect, but sometimes I wonder about causality. Not that I engage in magical thinking necessarily, but I think when you take any action, you open up doors. Meaningful, targeted action, and I think doors open that you don't even see, that facilitate things that were not possible right before. Joined by P-Trippa 103 says, question, is it still possible that countries still have large explosives? Well, yeah, fireworks exist. Bombs exist. But the premise of the nuke was all symbolic and alchemical. And I've been looking at the timing of it. This is fascinating when you get into it. The first UFO sighting, 1946. The nuke tests, 1946. There's a reason for that. Some say the nuke tests caused the aliens to come to put a stop to it. That's when the government's there's all these stories about it, but they've never been separate. And now we can add into this 1946 thing that the first UFO sightee, because they say 1947, but it was actually 1946. It was Marjorie Cameron. When you take into account who it was, it gets even more interesting. It's all stories, what I'm saying. The Oppenheimer movie, I haven't seen it yet, but it combined with the Barbie movie are actually connected in many levels as well. It has to do with the advent of the bombshell and the archetype of this new goddess. But everything's fakeable, absolutely. I think there are many ways you can describe. I mean, look, the mainstream media can take a rain shower, spring shower, and turn it into a hurricane. It's all about reporting. You've seen them do it. You've seen reporters leaning into the wind, and then some jogger walks by, casually vertical. It's like, oh, the wind is only on this side of the street. Like, they fake stuff all the time. They have turned our reality into a Truman Show. Gwillem Bradford says, our news stories and fakes aren't the only thing that are fake. Oh, yeah, everything's fake. Mary Curie is fake. Mary Curie, Mercury. Yeah, the worldview is entirely fake. And the news isn't news. This is the big lie. The big lie is that the mass media is just a bunch of people with cameras and microphones gathering intel for you as a service, right? Because they want you to be totally up to date and informed. No, their purpose is to misinform. It's to maintain a false worldview. Spirit Jordak says, if you reveal too much to the EU press, they will bury it. Treat them as newbies. Well, I don't know the full scope of this, and I haven't said very much because, again, I don't want to set off any alarms until it's too late. But this is probably going to be, yeah, it's going to be in this European newspaper, but it's probably going to be translated pretty much instantly. Now, I don't get the feeling it's a hit piece, but it doesn't have to be a hit piece to turn into a hit piece. It's just all about how the media reports on it. And do you really think that anybody in the mainstream media is going to take some critical analysis of their life's work, of their job, of their careers, and treat it like anything but toxic No, this is definitely toxic. Like I said, we're setting the controls of the think tank to the heart of the world stage. We're actually aiming for this clash, because in the clash, we can, in the chaos, it will draw out a lot of ideas and opinions and individuals into the fray, and we want that to happen. Because what we're doing here is we are exposing a vacuum, and we're already in it. We're occupying this vacuum, this off-world stage perspective, and it doesn't exist. It doesn't have a platform, and it will. I mean, it does with us, with this tank, but what we have to do is we have to tap into the various closed systems on the far conspiracy fringe that have, for some various reasons, I think it's mostly because of the false flag theory, but they've wrongfully assumed that most of what they see is real, but it's just worse than they think. It's like, no, you actually, you don't see through the matrix by walking into the screen. You got to step back. Like, they have everybody with their face to the screen. That's your reality. The conspiracy theorists tend to walk through the screen and go deeper, and they get a deeper story. It's more intriguing, but it's a deeper level of dream. It's the nightmare. And what I'm proposing is the stepping back, the minus, the subtractive view, the MSM minus. And I think there are many people who are in the matrix deeper than they should be, thinking that they're awake because they're hooked on this red pill fear porn. And I think that there's possibly tens or hundreds of thousands of minds that would be more inclined to take the true skeptic's approach. And the skeptic isn't the one that is just contrarian, counter narrative, and reactionary. Quite the opposite. The skeptic is the one that is pausing before agreeing, pausing before rendering judgment. And that's us. I'm perfectly fine and have been for several years saying, I don't know if the world looks specifically like the way they say. I just don't believe it. And you don't know it because it's not possible for you to know it. It's merely an optional belief. And from a broader perspective, I think you could properly contextualize the shape of the world, the globe itself, as just a God construct. It's the main unifier. It's the umbrella belief that unites everybody. Going through some comments. Evolvement says blue moon tomorrow. I haven't been talking about synchronicities a lot lately, but I want to, because I had a conversation on Twitter with someone who said, those are just coincidences. I'm like, well, at what point does it become a pattern? Like, how many times? And I find people are able to just overlook obvious patterns. And I think, well, what is the mental process there where they're filtering out meaning? Like, they sense it's meaningful, but something in their head screams at them. They got some cop in their head, some thought cop. It's like, don't think that, don't connect that, don't connect those dots. That's crazy. It's like, how convenient. Anybody begins to see that in order to, like, to really see, you have to take this holistic view of media. You can't separate Hollywood from politics, from entertainment, from history, from any of it, because it's all worldview. And if people begin to correlate all the different aspects of it, the believers are trained to see that person as possessed, as evil, as somehow their mind's gone askew. And what I'm here to point out, and that's what the whole purpose of Auto-Hoaxology 101 is that we're operating from a different framework. And it's all about frames, and it's not hard to understand how this all works when you think about, for example, the frame that on Christmas, that a child views Christmas versus an adult. The adult knows Santa's fake, but plays. The child doesn't, or probably does, but is still playing along, but everybody's playing along. It's just an agreed upon set of rules, and one person, the adults, are respectful of the frames of the children. They don't want to ruin the fun. So there's just different references that they have. And, you know, I wouldn't call it lying, because it's just a harmless holiday activity. It's just technically play. But with the media, is what I'm saying here, is that they have a framework that you adopt when you believe their stories wholeheartedly, as though it's been vetted, as though you can trust it. And it is kind of childish. There is a childish dynamic between the media and the media consumer. I describe the dynamic as that between a narcissist and a codependent in emotional bondage. by design. Big Brother is a narcissist. You don't see Big Brother as a singular entity because they realized that people can rebel against something they can see. So now the Big Brother has been decentralized, it has been fragmented, and it exists with many different facets, but you can't see the whole thing unless you're capable of taking that step back. The off-world stage perspective is the main key point to all of this. It's the point where you have to say, well, maybe I don't have enough information to come to a conclusion, and it leaves you with a lot of question marks. And I pointed this out before, that question marks are eventually going to be banned. They're going to take them off your keyboards. Like, check your keyboard if it's new. Does it have a question mark anymore? I was worried they were going to send UN troops back in 2020 and kick down doors in the middle of the night and rip the question marks off your keyboards. Why do you need them for? What do you need question marks for? If they have all the answers, and if deviating from those answers is wrong, then why do you need question marks? You see how that works? If it was a question, it wouldn't be publishable. It would be sent. If it would be, yeah. It's in other words, it's like questioning your faith. In other words, they've made questioning the media tantamount to questioning your religious faith. And for many people, my argument here is that it is their de facto religious faith. It has replaced and supplanted the role of religion in modern life. Gwillem Bradford says, I found an old conspiracy encyclopedia I read years ago. It's obvious now it was all alternative versions of things that never happened. Great way of putting it. Most conspiracy theories, I'll say all conspiracy theories, are alternative versions of things that never happened when it comes to these popular ones. Direct energy weapons, second shooters, biolabs. You have so many different storylines that you can choose from that all agree with the central premise. For example, 9/11, was it done by direct energy weapons, tactical nukes, thermites, skull and bone society, Jews, or Muslims? And when you get into that, you're like, well, okay, well, we can accept it was done by Muslims, but it was paid for by these guys. So you have like a million different versions that you could take from this. You could just choose your own fantasy to go with, and it's all just leading you in circles because you're not apprised of the central fact that maybe it didn't even happen. And this is a big deal because look at all the white nationalist types who say Jews did 9/11, they have to pay. I'm like, okay, well, if 9/11 didn't happen, then who has to pay? There's like, if it's not real, then are your grievances real? And if your grievances aren't real, then what of your worldview based on those grievances? Like, so what I'm saying here is that the mass media infrastructure holds a lot of people's worldviews together. I call it the lie world order for a reason. And a lot of people hold on to it because it's how they see the world. And if you challenge its premise, it leaves them in a void. And I don't think people are comfortable in the void. And for me, the void is where we are. That is the off-world stage. You get off the earth, you're in the void of space. You step off the world stage, you're in the void of, I'm suspending judgment on things that I can't verify so I don't become another believer lost in a world of subjective belief. We have the true overview effect. We've ascended. Metaphorically speaking. I mean, look, they say they have. I mean, honestly, they do. They say, we have the overview effect because we've gone to space, and from up here we can see the intrinsic need for oneness in all things. Like, they claim this phony higher perspective. Well, we're not claiming a phony higher perspective. I'm saying we're the only true objectivists left. So, are we ascended above the cess of the MSM's implemented worldview? Yes. They shouldn't even be censoring us. We're film critics. We're movie critics. We're psyop critics. Going through some comments. Echo Charlie says, awaiting the one narrative that wins out. But then there's the Kraken narrative. Too many people were at home watching real-time 2021. They really managed to turn January 6th into a new 9/11. And by the way, I'm going to be speaking to Woo's News as soon as he's done with his project. Let me see if he's messaged me. That's why I came in early today. I was hoping to touch base with him. But I had to jump on here today early because we are going to be live later for phones. But I'm wrapping up a bunch of art and other things, and I had these new books to put up on the shelf. I'm going through it. I'm going to make a couple of changes. I have a few ideas. I want to put something on the spine, but those of you who ordered these will be going out. I needed these as props for the interviews that I was scheduling before I knew that this European news agency was coming. Like I needed these for the self-produced thing I was doing, which I'm still doing. I just think it's fascinating that I prepared for something, and now it seems like it was inevitable. Which is a sense that I get. What we're doing does, I get the sense that this is a vacuum that exists and has existed for a long time, and there's a lot of people in this vacuum, but they're not consolidated, they're not networked, and that's all been because of the intentional efforts of the other side. Infinite Muse says cognitive dissonance is too uncomfortable to transcend for most people. Yeah, I was thinking about this today. I was like, the main thing that holds this system together, I say lie world order, but it's ego. Because the eyes, the senses lie to some extent, or you have the possibility of perceptual errors, of optical illusions, and then there's deliberate trickery that feeds into your biases. Then on top of that, you have sleight of mind, logical fallacies you may not even be aware of, tricks of the media trade. It's like a carnival. And all these rubes, all these dupes, there's a sucker born every minute. They don't know. They don't know the tricks that these are unwinnable games. War Games, the movie says, the only strange game, the only winning move is not to play. And that's true. You go to a carnival, there are some games where you just lose. So you have to have fun. That's the whole point of it, is to have fun. But the cognitive dissonance that prevents people from leaving, yeah, that's because I think there's this ego attachment to being right. And when you get in, you're duped, you're tricked, and you have to be able to recognize you've been tricked. I think it was Mark Twain, he said, it is easier to fool a man than convince him he's been fooled. And then you attach to that, most people are fooled when their emotions are tapped into. So it bypasses their logic. So now you're trying to deal with an emotionally held conviction. But this is why I think it's very important from the outset to establish a distinction between things that we believe and things that we know. Because most people understand the difference between religious beliefs and scientifically held convictions. And some people can reconcile it, others can't. But there is a distinction. And what I'm saying is with media, they have turned the average consumer of media into a religious fundamentalist in terms of their psychoepistemology. They're appropriating new information, they're getting their news through their emotions, their feelings, consensus. A lot of it is just pointed at their emotional take on things. It's non-rational. It's feelings-based. Save the children. Okay, I like the idea, save the children. But let's attach that to something objective. Not these hypothetical children in tunnels being trafficked by the reptoids, or the hypothetical children that got vaporized by direct energy weapons from China. Space lasers. Like, those aren't real children, but it's an emotional appeal. Like, why wouldn't you save the children? Oh, you don't want to save the dude children? You must be a groomer. That was the argument for that movie. Oh, you didn't see Sound of Freedom? I think we have a groomer here. Then you find out Sound of Freedom was Sound of Farce. As fake as anything else that's promoted by the mass media. You don't hear anything about Tim Ballard now. Where's Tim Ballard? Parachuting in to Hawaii, right? Isn't that where he is? Isn't Tim Ballard parachuting in behind the lines that the police put up in Maui? Looking for the dead kids, or hidden kids, or tunnel kids, or missing kids? No, he's not. He's spending money that should have gone to the director of the film who didn't make any money off of it. Tommy Jones says, someone posted a comment on one of IPS's streams about $6 Million Man, Season 1, Episode 11, with William Shatner as an astronaut that comments that the Earth is flat. Okay, we will have to research that. Does anybody have any information about William Shatner saying that the Earth is flat? Shatner is a very interesting character, by the way. I think Captain Kirk is based on Captain Cook, who explored the new frontier back when it was the oceans. I think Captain Kirk going to space represented, well, William Shatner going to space represented space being the new frontier, and he went up there with Bezos' company. Bezos, Texas, cowboy hat, richest man on earth, sees space as a new frontier to go pull down mineral wealth, mining asteroids, bringing more capitalism down, which would be very destructive. It would be very destructive to the environment, etc., according to the main narratives. So then he says, when he comes down, that the Earth is facing some kind of catastrophic event. And he was crying, and he said, looking down at the world, he felt like he was at a wake for Mother Earth. Like these are all influencers. You know, we talk about influencers all the time, social media influencers. Well, every single movie star is an influencer. They're all packed with agenda. They're all packed with things that they may not even know, but memes, archetypes. Angle of Elevation says, since the root of conspiracy is to conspire that involves two people, the silly conspiracies that don't involve anyone conspiring, just your alt belief, aren't they in fact not conspiracies at all? Yeah, technically what you're saying is, we're looking at projection. Like when they say, oh, the hoaxers. The hoaxers are saying that the school shooting's a hoax. Okay, that doesn't make sense. Because if I'm saying it's a hoax, I'm accusing them, the media, of being hoaxers. But then they're calling me a hoaxer for calling them hoaxers. I'm like, no, I'm the hoax accuser. There's a difference there, but it's projection. And I think what they're doing is they're conspiring to keep everyone in the dark. And if you call it out, they call you a conspiracy theorist. And they are conspiring. I talked about penguins being the deepest diving of all birds. Emperor penguins. The deep dive thing. And there's a number of ways that penguins fit this think tank as a mascot because of the way that we are operating in the world. The deep dive, of course, self-explanatory. But then you have the phenomenon of penguins huddling, where they huddle together and they breathe in. They conspire. And the conspiring of penguins in a huddle actually warms the air. Now the warmth that they create shields them against the cold, windy, harsh conditions, etc. But this, to me, represents sort of what we're doing. Our conversations go against the darkness, the ignorance, the ice, the secrecy. And so we're in this barren environment, the barrenest environment of all, the fringe conspiracy realm of total censorship. And we're conspiring. We're talking about these subjects. And to me, that is creating this pocket of light or heat confronting the darkness and the ignorance and the secrecy and the censorship. It's a perfect metaphor for what we're doing here. We are conspiring in that sense. It just means breathe together, right? Echo Charlie says, William Shatner believes in climate disaster. He purports to. I think William Shatner is probably not who we think he is whatsoever. I mean, I think he's a great guy, I'm sure. I think George Takei would disagree. But the fact that he's been to space means that he's been to fake space. The fact that he's been to fake space means that he knows that his entire role has been a farce. I mean, I often posited the question, who's a better astronaut, William Shatner or Buzz Aldrin? If space travel is nothing more than pretending to be an astronaut on TV. Well, I think you could argue that William Shatner is a better astronaut. He's done it more. But who's a better actor? I'm going to go with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin because they have kept the role up for decades. But no, he's an insider. And as an insider, he would know climate catastrophe is a hoax to convince people that they shouldn't own property. He knows it's a big communist hoax. Communitarian hoax, communist hoax, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's just this hive mind that we're all being converted into. Now, I have a ton of information, new information to go through regarding, of all things, 9/11, The Shining, and Stephen King. Let me go ahead and bring this up really quick. This is intriguing. I think Violet posted this in Gilded. A reference to a movie called Doctor Sleep. Doctor Sleep is a sequel to The Shining. Now, the interesting thing about it is this. Doctor Sleep 2019, supernatural horror film, a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's, based on Stephen King's 2013 novel of the same name. Now, before I say anything else, I want to say this. The movie The Shining is known for having a lot of hints that Kubrick had involvement in Apollo 11, but I think it's more interesting and relevant here that it has predictive programming for 9/11. The Shining predicts 9/11 in many ways, which we'll talk about here shortly. But now, this is what's interesting. Stephen King's sequel to The Shining is about a, quote, Ava Stone, a baby girl born in 2001, who manifests psychic powers and seemingly predicts the 9/11 attacks. So you have a baby that predicts 9/11, born in 2001, in this book. That's a sequel to The Shining, which was about, or contained, predictive programming for the 9/11 attacks. Fascinating connection there, because this is correlating 9/11 with The Shining, which has never been done outside of conspiracy theory conjecture. But now Stephen King has actually kind of cemented his brand here, that yes, The Shining is definitely some kind of psy-war operation. The movies are there to entertain you, sure, but programming is their real function. It all serves a programming function. Thank you, AGA DA8ME737. We appreciate the support. Spirit Jordak says the girl's full name is Abracadabra. You got to be kidding me. Okay, the girl in the book Doctor Sleep, Abra Stone, is Abracadabra. Now, abracadabra is the key word, or the master word, according to Aleister Crowley, of the New Age. The Halloween store, where Musk got his Devil's Avenger red suit of armor with the upside down crosses and Ares ram's head, came from a store called Abracadabra. But yeah, here's the thing. This psychic child witnesses something, and it turns out that this story contains an adrenochrome type subtext where children are being harvested for their, quote, shining. But yeah, again, in the meantime, Abra Stone, a baby girl born in 2001, begins to manifest psychic powers when she predicts 9/11. Echo Charlie says, Tim, that was amazing on the Kubrick stare. Cannot unsee that. Oh yes, Donald Trump's Kubrick stare. And I have more pointing to Kubrick's role in directing Trump's incoming headshot. And it is coming. There is something there. And you look, I'm not saying it's going to be real. Nothing is. And I'm not going to make an exception for something that hasn't happened yet. Like, this might be real. But there is something building for it. Do you all recall the play in 2017, Julius Caesar, featuring Trump getting assassinated? Like, they've been doing this for a long time. And again, what I said, you cannot separate news from entertainment, from theater, from politics, from celebrity drama. It's all psy-war. Everything's staged. All reality TV shows are staged, and obviously so. And I almost think that reality TV was put there to conceal the fact that all TV is reality TV. It's all curated in the same way. Now let me play this clip here from Inside Edition. Staging of Trump's Julius Caesar features Trump getting assassinated.
It's an actor dressed to look just like President Donald Trump as he's assassinated on stage. Look as his character is stabbed to death. And there's no mistaking the Trump connection. Check out the unbuttoned overcoat and red tie that hangs over his waist. It's a staging of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar that is outraging many. The controversial production is taking place here in New York City's Central Park. The staging is being seen as a direct jab at Trump and the controversial political climate in this country. There are other similarities to Trump. Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, bears a resemblance to First Lady Melania.
No, it's just a coincidence. Let's play their game. Oh, the fact that it looks like Trump and Melania, and that they all threatened to kill Trump. Madonna wanted to blow up the White House. Kathy Griffin wants to chop off his head. Snoop Dogg shot him in a video. You know, despite all of this, and do you remember that track by, I think it was Mac Miller, F. Donald Trump? Is that the guy? The F. Donald Trump song. The album cover had Trump with like an X over an I. So they're building up this icon, which they're going to obviously take down. But they will say this is a coincidence. They will play it down all the time. But it's basically the death of Trump as Caesar. It's a bloody play. This was actually protested by Laura Loomer and Jack Pizzagate Posobiec. Laura Loomer actually got on the stage and interrupted this thing.
Caesar, his white dress shirt soaked in blood. There was mixed reaction about this new twist.
I didn't like that they...
Now, you want to say all these Democrats are bloodthirsty, they want to fantasize about killing Bush, killing Trump. Yeah, that's true. But you can no longer say that the bloodthirst is partisan. Like, both sides are bloodthirsty. Okay, let's see what else. We were talking about Dr. Sleep and how it has predictive programming for 9/11. So let me go ahead and run through one of my favorite content creators on this topic, which is Chartword. And he's just put out a few articles. He's on Twitter. I've seen him there. I've never directly interacted with him, but I want to write to him and interview him at some point because of what he's come up with here. So here's the article: Stanley Kubrick's faked death in the 9/11 hoax. So without getting into too much of this Stanley Kubrick's fake death stuff, I want to point out The Shining. He mentions Jay Weidner started the conspiratorial ball rolling with his article on The Shining. This expands on that line of thinking by deconstructing Eyes Wide Shut, Full Metal Jacket, and The Shining. But here's what he's showing, is that all these movies are interconnected and they're all predicting the same things. But listen to this. Now, actually, we already heard about this previously, but the twins, the twins in The Shining were not originally twins in Stephen King's book. This was an alteration, but this was because this was meant to associate them with the Twin Towers. It was Kubrick's decision to make them identical twins. When the audience first sees the twins, and the backstory is the previous caretaker of the hotel killed his daughters, and these are the ghosts. When the audience first sees the twins, they're standing next to each other like the Twin Towers. Danny is on his big wheel, speeding towards them. Now, when he's psychic, and so Danny's able to see them dead on the ground, chopped up with the axe after he passes. And the way that they're on the ground, the twins, with their axe wounds and the fireman's axe and the upturned chair, it looks like Ground Zero, just automatically. But next you have the scene where he's throwing darts, which the author here connects with projectiles and planes. And here you have the twins, and adjacent to the twins is the Bell telephone phone booth. Next to the Twin Towers is the Bell telephone tower. Now, what's more, you have the monolith. It's at the 9/11 site, a hotel specifically designed to resemble the 2001 monolith. It's called the Millennium Hilton. So here you have the Millennium Hilton overlooking Ground Zero. And this goes back to Space Odyssey 2001, a very Ground Zero-like scene. There's even a scene in Space Odyssey where a space plane is flying into the twin-wheeled space station, and it looks like a plane going into the Twin Towers. Dr. Strangelove has references to a jet airplane on a rogue, low-flying attack mission, which seems to be predictive programming for the Pentagon attack. But these are just a few cherry-picked examples of the predictive programming in The Shining and a few of other Kubrick's works that reference 9/11 by mainly the architecture, the Ground Zero being represented here. It gets even a little more interesting when you go into the symbolism and even like the logos, for example. The Hilton logo And again, that's a Hilton hotel designed to look like Kubrick, so that's a direct Kubrick reference at Ground Zero. Look at the Hilton logo and tell me it doesn't look like Twin Towers with the plane's flight path going into it. The impact zones are there in white. Not a coincidence. So again, my point being, if we can find copious predictive programming for 9/11 in the works of Kubrick, and in The Shining in particular, and then The Shining Part 2 comes out, and it stars a character who predicts 9/11, and that's out of Stephen King's pen, so that's not even hidden, that's not inferred, it's just directly in the plot. What do you make of that? Again, thanks to Violet for that lead. That's Doctor Sleep, which I'm probably going to watch. I read a bit about it, and it seems there's a couple of things. One, it grossed 7.32 million. So instantly there, you're like, oh, 732, 237, room 237, the movie that decodes The Shining, the distance, hundreds of thousands of miles to the moon. Okay, following the events of The Shining, the owners of the Overlook remain psychologically traumatized. Abra Stone begins to manifest psychic powers. She predicts the 9/11 attacks. There's much in here, though, about this steam, they call it, the adrenochrome, whatever they're feeding off of the psychic children. I think there's even a point in here where they talk about a child being tortured to death. Not my kind of movie, but very typical. And it seems like so many of these movies have this bizarre subtext that has to do with some kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, soul harvesting. Echo Charlie says, I never heard of Doctor Sleep. I hadn't either. But it's fascinating just how it connects to the subtext of the movie based on his first book. And Stephen King is a major influencer. If you look at his work in general, it's pretty much all anti-capitalism. Truckers are the bad guys. Capitalism revolts in the form of our appliances killing us in maximum overdrive. People under the stairs, rich people oppressing the poor under the stairs, and then there's a revolution when LL Cool J breaks in, and then the money shoots out the chimney and all the poor people get the money. I mean, all these movies that Stephen King puts out are coming from a hardline leftist communist revolutionary attitude and perspective. He's always ripping on middle America, stereotyping rednecks, for example, or stereotyping poor whites in very negative ways. That's been his shtick from day one. He's always been an enemy of the people. But whether he's in on all the secrets, I couldn't say. But I think these authors at that level are probably linked to the monolith in some way. And the monolith that we see at Ground Zero, the monolith of Stanley Kubrick, it represents the movie screen. Your screened reality. It's a symbol. Your iPhone. When they finish curating it and censoring it, it will be the monolith, the one stone. It'll be the new monotheism, which it practically already is. They just got to scrub the non-canonical, apocryphal, and bannable texts. Got to silence all of the heretics. Donald J. Trump truthed this: America is becoming a banana republic. That's what happens when you indict your political opponents. These are dark days in the life of America. And he posted with it an image of the Banana Republic. Now, I don't know if he did this or one of his aides did it, but this is what I got, Banana Republic. And I think it's kind of ominous, because if you look inside of the Banana Republic, which is a clothing store, I just see a bunch of headless mannequins. Dark days for America, headless mannequins. I'm just detecting a little bit of stochastic violence there. Maybe even predictive programming. We'll see. There was a shooting in a dollar store, basically a really cheap dollar store psyop, hardly worth reporting on, but it's been amplified because it's white on black, and it's just another Kyle Rittenhouse clone. It's probably why they only had him shoot 3. Jumpers at UNC Chapel Hill jumping out of the building after reports of an active shooter. Just more fuel for their martyr cult. Now, let me read this. We talk about Trump and this predictive programming, Alex Jones is in on it. Since 2016, he has been talking about how they're going to take him out. They're going to take him out. Jones has been really hyping this for some time. But this is Alex Jones talking about how Trump is not even
diamonds
human. That Trump is not even fully human, or he's more than human. That he's transcended this realm. That he's some kind of godly being. Let me play this excerpt from InfoWars.
He's riding like the one-eyed jack of diamonds with the devil close behind. He's not one-eyed. He's got one eye on earth, one eye into heaven. He's already not of the earth completely. He's already transcended his body.
Wait, one eye on earth, one eye on the heavens. Like, how do you do that? You turn your head sideways? You'd have to be very, you'd have to have some real peripheral vision there. But let me play on. Just ignore the fact that he sounds a little slurred.
The one-eyed man in the land of the blind is king. And if Trump's anything, he's a one-eyed man. And if Trump's anything, he's a one-eyed man.
Okay, now he's a one-eyed man. That's the main point there I wanted to bring up. The one-eyed man. Because the idea of the shooting, the headshot, it all involves the one-eye symbol. The one-eye Antichrist motif that we're kind of looking at here. So he put it out there, one-eyed man, one-eyed man. What the hell does that actually mean? Now, when we go into the predictive programming, etc., you got here's the song, F Donald Trump. There's a couple of them. This one is with Nipsey Hussle, a protest song. I alluded to this earlier, and other than, here we go. This is one of the few songs I've heard from Nipsey, outside of what we heard from that one album that he released on the Solstice. I didn't know he was on this one. Single by YG and Nipsey Hussle. It's interesting because Nipsey Hussle is the rapper who was killed at 33 after carrying a sun cross to the front of his store. He was shot between his two friends who were convicts, like Jesus between two thieves. The entire Nipsey Hussle death scenario was a setup. He was portrayed as a Osiris. Laura London was Isis. They had all kinds of Christification that went into Nipsey Hussle. So it's interesting that he's on this track. And if you look here, the F Donald Trump track, it has Trump with one eye X'd out. This track was recorded in an hour and was inspired by Hussle's positive experience of working with Mexican immigrants. There you go, boom. Going through some psyops. Evolvement says a cheap psyop. Oh yeah, it's a dollar store psyop, Dollar General. No witnesses, no blood, no marches, no signage, no t-shirts with the victims' faces. No, it was just like your nightly outrage, then you just move on tomorrow. And they like doing this. Because if they can do 50 or 60 outrages like this a year, you can't keep up. It overwhelms you. And that's what they're doing with the sea of misinformation, malinformation. It's actually misinfo. The general public is misinformed. We are informed. The mass media are also misinformed, but they're also the appointed misinformers. Like, I don't think they're in the know necessarily. It's on a need-to-know basis. Jones, because of his position and where he is, I assume he knows mostly everything about the fakeness of the world stage, except for space. He seems to believe in space. And things are that compartmentalized, where he may not be in the know about space, or because he knows astronauts. He's had Buzz Aldrin on. He's talked to astronauts. So it's possible that he knows it's fake, or he's been given a story that he found plausible. Like, hey, Alex Jones, it's real, but we're using super high-tech flying saucers, and we're trying to hide that. So we're just going to give him this BS space shuttle stuff and just go with that. But it's way more sophisticated, and space is way realer than you know. And he's like, wow, mind blown. And he goes along with it, thinking that space is real, but the way they represent it is fake for tactical and strategic reasons.
You are listening to Infinite Plane Radio. Stick around for live call-in shows. Stay for the music and recent replays. Join us at infiniteplane.live for 24/7 live chat with other listeners.